The video on Sunday didn't quite come on when we needed it to, and half the sermon got up. So here's the full sermon for the 8th Sunday after Pentecost, Matthew 13, 24 through 30, and 36 through 43. We're in a section of the gospel hearing stories about what the kingdom of heaven is like. So imagine that with me for a moment. What is the kingdom of heaven like? I bet we can picture so many good, beautiful, exciting, loving things under that question. But today's story, this gospel, depicts something I don't always think of first about the kingdom. Like last week's extravagant sower, it's a bit wild, patient, even freeing, this picture. In the parable, there's a time of judgment coming when what is weedy will be called out and what's growing good will thrive. It's clear that for the early church and for this Matthew's community, this was a needed message. It was a tumultuous time for them. They were wondering who believes what and what a Christian community should look and feel like, and wondering how spiritual people following Jesus grow together. So much so that some scholars point out this parable sits at the very center of Matthew's gospel because that position points to something central about what his community wanted to emphasize. And what do we hear in this dream of the kingdom of God? Eager servants wanting to tend the sower's field, good intentions, but they're told, let it be for now. Let the weeds and the wheat grow up together, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. There will be a time for gathering up the weeds, but not now, and not by us. It's not always my move that gets to go, not always my time. In essence, this parable is also saying we're going to let God be God. And how would we say that's been going for us and humanity? Letting God be God has been a struggle across all time, hasn't it? It's part of our earliest imaginings, our earliest stories. In Genesis 3, the serpent says, eat the fruit and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. You could let God be God, or you could be like God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Lutheran theologian, lectured on that very phrase, be like God. He says, it remains our ongoing temptation. In the parable, aren't we tempted the same way to judge for ourselves what's healthy and what's not, and go cutting through what's growing up? It's you and I asking, hey, where did these weeds come from? Do you want us to go and gather them? While the sower, the householder, the master says, let it be. Bonhoeffer says humans have got to watch out for when they take on that self-appointed position of judge, because when you and I move to become judge and like God ourselves, we move outside of being and becoming the creature we were made to be. And ultimately, it's actually disempowering, this move for ourselves. In self-reliance, there is a weakening because of disunion, because we're out of the order we had as creatures under God, our God. Like imposing our self-will, we actually lose the strength we receive from the unity we're fashioned to have. And instead, we get disunion from God, from the neighbor, from the earth, and internally within our own selves. Have you seen Christopher Nolan's new film take yet on Homer's Odyssey? it has me thinking about epic poems again. And the one I ever studied really was as an undergraduate, and it was Milton's Paradise Lost. I took a class at University of Texas at Arlington on John Milton, and maybe we'll take up Paradise Lost this fall in the adult forum. But it's worth turning to this week too, since Milton wrestles with this very temptation from Genesis in his epic poetry from the 1600s. In Book 5 of Paradise Lost, Satan, whose name means adversary, makes his case to a crowd of fellow angels for why they shouldn't bow to God or to God's chosen one, the Son. He goes on and on about what they're owed, and the whole assembly is nodding along, except for Abdiel, whose name means servant of God. Among the seraphims, he is the only one who objects, and he says, "But what about the Maker? How could we deny the power and wonder of what God our King has made?" And Satan responds, "Who saw when this creation was? Rememberest thou thy making, while the Maker gave thee being? We know no time when we were not as now, know none before us, self-begot, self-raised, by our own quickening power." The poem depicts Satan appealing to the angels, asking about their making, what they saw, what they know, but even just what they feel right now. We know no time when we were not as now, preaching self-sufficiency, and in that freedom, erasing dependency, so they are self-begot, self-raised by our own quickening power. Look, Paradise Lost is pretty lengthy. It's like 12 books and something over 10,000 lines long, one of the longest poems in the English language. So I might have just saved you some time, because in all of those lines is this description essentially of the temptation, which is our temptation. Even when we think, well, I know I'm wheat, let's get everything else cut down. I'm self-raised wheat over here. That, my friends, is an attempt at the good news of self-reliance, but it is not the good news of the gospel. The good news for the Christian is that we are made free, but for, not from. Our freedom, as Bonhoeffer describes it, holds the union. It grows more connected, more entangled, loyal, relational. Christian, you are free. Free to draw closer to God, closer to the fellowship of faith, closer to mission and dream, closer to those in need. For those who need a helper, a physician, or a welcome beyond judgment. We are free for God and for each other, not from. So think back on the jazz nights for Mr. Rogers that we had with Louis and Dave and Andy and Isaiah. They performed some soaring solos. Part of what made the room that night feel free and playful was the music was. But they didn't just play whatever came to mind. Together they picked a key and agreed on a form and on the changes and on the number of bars before the tune would circle back on itself. And then one at a time, they improvised within the space that was created. It sounded free. It was free. But only because everyone else held that form steady underneath the whole time. Sometimes playing less and getting quiet and giving way to the other. So you might say the players were free for each other and for the sake of the song. And Robert Frost said something similar about poetry. He compared writing without form to playing tennis, or we might say pickleball these days, playing that game with the net down. If you take the net away, you haven't really just loosened the game, you've pretty much ended it, because the form isn't what keeps the beauty from happening, it's what lets you continue creating. And I really like this because I have found I am most creative, or I feel thoughtfully free when I'm playing a game and learning the rules, but they've been clearly laid out, and then I and you can get a sense then, okay, what's my role here and now within this world and this space and these constraints? Knowing all this, what now do I get to do? And usually there's so much. And Christian, in the life of the gospel, there is so much you are free for. So come to the table. It is free. You are invited as you are, wheat and weed, both. The way the field was told to keep growing. This is Luther's old strange word for us. We are each of us at the same time saint and sinner, wheat and weed all at once. Jesus doesn't wait for the harvest to meet us and feed us. He's come to make a home now and to hand us the kingdom, not because we've been sorted out and approved, but because he's chosen to sustain the whole tangled field as it is, calling forth its growth in response to his life and love. So wheat and weeds, come. The kingdom of heaven is like you and me today, still growing, not yet finished, welcomed to this table of grace in the freedom of God.